The funeral was on a Tuesday, and Will Smith sat in the back row of a half-empty church in West Philadelphia, wearing sunglasses that couldn't hide the tears streaming down his face. Nobody recognized him. He'd made sure of that. As the pastor spoke about Marcus Williams, the boy who had shared dreams with Will under the basketball hoops of their childhood, Will clutched a letter in his pocket that he'd written but never sent. A letter that could have changed everything. Marcus had died believing that his best friend had forgotten him the moment fame knocked on his door. But the truth was, Will had thought about Marcus every single day for 23 years. He just never found the courage to pick up the phone. From which city in the world are you watching this story today? If stories about friendship, regret, and the price of fame touch your heart, please consider subscribing. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that remind us what really matters before it's too late. West Philadelphia in 1983 was a neighborhood where dreams were both born and buried on the same street corners. For two 15-year-old boys named Will Smith and Marcus Williams, those dreams were everything. They had met in 7th grade when Marcus moved to the neighborhood from North Philly, carrying nothing but a worn basketball and a smile that could light up the darkest corners of their struggling community. Will and Marcus were inseparable from the moment they met. While other kids their age were getting into trouble or giving up on school, these two boys spent every free moment planning their escape from poverty. They would sit on Marcus's front steps until late into the night, talking about the men they would become. Will wanted to be a rapper, convinced he could make people laugh and think with his words. Marcus dreamed of becoming a teacher, believing he could save other kids the way he wished someone had saved him. Their friendship was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared struggle. Marcus's father had left when he was 8, and his mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Will's parents were together, but money was always tight, and the pressure of keeping his family's hopes alive weighed heavily on his young shoulder. In each other they found the encouragement they couldn't always find at home. Every day after school, they would meet at the basketball court behind Martin Luther King High School. Marcus was the better player. He had natural athletic ability that Will envied, but Will was the entertainer. He would freestyle rap while Marcus shot hoops, creating elaborate stories about their future success. Their routine was sacred: basketball until sunset, then homework together at the local library, then dreams shared under the streetlights until their mothers called them home. One day, Marcus would say, spinning the basketball on his finger, "When you're famous and I'm teaching kids in some nice suburban school, we'll look back on this and laugh." "Man," Will would respond, already practicing the confident swagger that would one day make him a star, "when I'm famous, I'm bringing you with me. We're gonna change the world together." They made a pact that summer of 1983, sealed with a handshake that felt more binding than any contract. No matter where life took them, they would never forget where they came from, or the friend who believed in their dreams when no one else did. They were brothers, they said, chosen by circumstance and bonded by hope. The first crack in their friendship appeared in 1985 when Will got his big break. DJ Jazzy Jeff, already making waves in the local hip-hop scene, heard Will freestyle at a party and invited him to collaborate. Suddenly, Will was spending his afternoons in recording studios instead of on basketball court. His evenings were filled with performances at local clubs rather than homework sessions with Marcus. At first, Marcus was genuinely excited for his friend's success. He would show up to every performance, cheering louder than anyone else in the crowd. He helped Will practice his lyrics and even contributed ideas for songs. But as Will's popularity grew, the distance between them became impossible to ignore. The phone calls became shorter and less frequent. The late-night conversations about their dreams were replaced by Will's exhausted accounts of studio sessions and performance schedule. Marcus tried to be understanding, but it hurt to watch his best friend slowly slip away into a world that seemed to have no room for a kid from North Philly who just wanted to teach children. The real breaking point came in 1986 when Will and DJ Jazzy Jeff landed their first record deal. Will was 17, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of him. Record executives, managers, and promoters all demanded his time and attention. In the chaos of meetings and contract negotiations, Marcus became an afterthought. Marcus learned about Will's record deal not from his best friend, but from a newspaper article. The hurt was immediate and devastating. For days he waited for Will to call and share the news personally, to invite him to celebrate this milestone they had dreamed about together. The call never came. When Marcus finally worked up the courage to call Will, he was told by Will's new manager that Mr. Smith was too busy to take personal calls. The message was clear. Their friendship had become an inconvenience. That night, Marcus sat alone on his front steps, spinning his basketball and trying to understand how his brother could have forgotten him so quickly. He wrote Will a letter that he never sent, filled with congratulations and hurt feelings, expressing how proud he was and how much he missed their friendship. The letter ended with a simple request. Just remember me when you make it to the top. As Will's career skyrocketed, Marcus watched from a distance like a stranger observing someone he used to know. He bought every album, watched every TV appearance, and felt a confusing mixture of pride and heartbreak with each new success. The boy he had shared dreams with was becoming the man they had always known he could be, but Marcus was no longer part of that journey. Marcus threw himself into his own life with determination born of necessity. He graduated high school with honors, earned a scholarship to Temple University, and pursued his teaching degree with the same passion he had once reserved for their shared dream. He became the teacher he had always wanted to be, working with underprivileged kids in the same neighborhoods where he and Will had grown up. But even as Marcus built a meaningful life for himself, he couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. Every time he saw Will's face on television or heard his music on the radio, he was reminded of the friend he had lost to fame. He never spoke bitterly about Will to others. His loyalty ran too deep for that. But the wound never fully healed. For Will, success came with a price he hadn't anticipated. The higher he climbed, the more isolated he became from the people and places that had shaped him. He thought about Marcus constantly, especially during quiet moments between performances or late at night in hotel rooms across the country. He carried guilt like a weight in his chest, knowing he had broken his promise to his best friend. But as months turned into years, reaching out became increasingly difficult. How do you call someone you've ignored for so long? How do you explain that fame had become a prison that kept you from the relationships that mattered most? How do you say you're sorry when you're not sure sorry is enough? Will convinced himself that Marcus was probably better off without him. He was busy building his teaching career, making a real difference in kids' lives. Will told himself that his friend didn't need the complication of staying connected to someone whose life had become a circus of media attention and public scrutiny. The years passed, and both men built successful lives in their respective worlds. Will became a global superstar, transitioning from music to television with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, then to movies where he became one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. Marcus became a beloved teacher and eventually a principal, dedicating his life to helping children in underserved communities reach their potential. But neither man forgot the friendship that had shaped them during their formative years. Will often found himself driving through their old neighborhood when he was in Philadelphia, hoping to catch a glimpse of Marcus. He never stopped, never knocked on doors to ask about his old friend, but the desire to reconnect was always there, buried beneath layers of pride and fear. Marcus kept a scrapbook of Will's career achievements, newspaper clippings and magazine articles, documenting his friend's rise to superstardom. He told his students about knowing Will Smith back in the day, but he never revealed the depth of their friendship or the pain of its ending. When his students asked if he ever talked to Will, Marcus would smile and say they had lost touch, making it sound natural rather than heartbreaking. In 2005, Marcus was diagnosed with diabetes. It was manageable at first. Medication, diet changes, regular doctor visit. He continued teaching, continued being the positive force in his students' lives that he had always been. But as the years passed, his health began to decline more rapidly than anyone expected. By 2007, Marcus's diabetes had led to serious complications. His kidney function was deteriorating, and he was facing the possibility of dialysis. For the first time since his teenage years, he found himself scared and feeling truly alone. His mother had passed away 3 years earlier, and he had never married. His students and fellow teachers were wonderfully supportive, but there's a different kind of comfort that comes from a friend who knew you before you became who you are. During one particularly difficult night in the hospital, Marcus asked his friend and colleague Janet to help him find Will Smith's contact information. It wasn't for a favor or assistance with medical bills. Marcus was too proud for that. He simply wanted to hear his old friend's voice one more time, to know that their childhood friendship had meant something to Will too. Janet spent weeks trying to reach Will through official channels. She called agents, managers, and production companies. She sent letters and emails. Every attempt was met with the same polite but firm response. Mr. Smith's representatives would pass along the message, but they couldn't guarantee a response due to his busy schedule. Marcus waited for months, checking his phone and mailbox with the hope of a teenager waiting for word from his crush. As his health continued to decline, that hope became one of the few things keeping his spirits up. He would tell Janet, "Will's probably just figuring out what to say. We always overthought things when we were kids too." The call never came. Meanwhile, Will was dealing with his own struggles, the pressure of maintaining his career, his marriage problems that were becoming increasingly public, and the general exhaustion that comes with decades of being in the spotlight, had left him emotionally drained. He had stopped reading most of the fan mail and requests that came through his management team. There were simply too many, and he had learned to trust his representatives to handle what they deemed important. Marcus's friends' messages never reached Will. They were filtered out by assistants who had been trained to protect their boss from the overwhelming volume of people claiming to know him personally. The irony was cruel. The one person Will would have dropped everything to contact was reaching out at the exact moment when Will's defenses against the outside world were strongest. In early 2008, Marcus's kidney function declined to the point where dialysis became necessary. The treatments left him weak and often confused. During his lucid moments, he would still ask Janet if there had been any word from Will. She continued to tell him that she was still trying, unable to break his heart by admitting that their efforts had been unsuccessful. As Marcus's condition worsened, he began to accept that he would probably never speak to Will again, but rather than feeling angry or bitter, he found himself reflecting on their friendship with gratitude. Those years of brotherhood had been some of the happiest of his life, and he couldn't bring himself to regret loving someone who had brought him so much joy, even if that love had ultimately gone unreciprocated. Marcus Williams died on a Tuesday morning in March 2008, surrounded by his students and fellow teachers, who had become his chosen family. His last coherent words were about Will. He told Janet, "I hope he knows I never stopped being proud of him. I hope he knows I understood why he couldn't call." Janet found the unmailed letter Marcus had written to Will 22 years earlier, tucked in his Bible alongside dozens of newspaper clippings about Will's career. She decided that this time, she would make sure the message reached its intended recipient, regardless of how many barriers she had to break through. Will was on a movie set in Los Angeles when his assistant finally brought him the letter and the news of Marcus's death. He had been in the middle of filming a scene, but when he read Janet's brief note explaining who Marcus was and what had happened, he asked for the set to be cleared and locked himself in his trailer. The letter was written in Marcus's careful handwriting, faded with age but still legible. "Dear Will, I know you probably won't ever read this, but I needed to write it anyway. I saw in the paper about your record deal, and I want you to know how proud I am. We always knew you'd make it, and seeing it actually happen feels like watching our dreams come true. I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt that I found out from a newspaper instead of from you. I keep waiting for you to call and tell me about it yourself. Maybe invite me to celebrate with you, but I understand that your life is different now, and maybe there isn't room in it for a kid from North Philly who still thinks our old friendship was the most important thing in the world. I want you to know that I don't blame you for anything. You're doing exactly what we always said you'd do, and I couldn't be happier for you. I hope that wherever your career takes you, you remember that there's someone back home who believes in you completely and always will. Just remember me when you make it to the top. Remember the basketball court, and the streetlights, and the two boys who thought they could change the world together. Remember that you have a brother who loves you no matter how famous you get, or how far away you go. Congratulations on everything. I can't wait to see what you do next. Your friend always, Marcus." Will read the letter 6 times before the words stopped blurring through his tears. 22 years. Marcus had carried this letter for 22 years, and he had never stopped believing in their friendship, even when Will had given him every reason to give up. The funeral was small, held at the same church where Marcus and Will had attended youth programs as teenagers. Janet had reached out to Will personally, and this time her message got through. Will flew to Philadelphia that morning, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, hoping to pay his respects without creating a scene. As he sat in the back row of the half-empty church, listening to testimonials from Marcus's students and colleagues, Will was struck by the life his friend had built. Teacher of the Year 3 times, mentor to hundreds of kids, a man who had dedicated his life to giving children the kind of encouragement and belief that he had once given to a future superstar.
The pastor spoke about Marcus's kindness, his dedication to his students and his unwavering faith, but it was Marcus's colleague, Janet, who shared the detail that broke Will's heart completely. She told the small congregation about Marcus's scrapbook, filled with articles about Will's career achievements, and how he would show it to students as an example of what was possible when you believed in your dream. Marcus never spoke with bitterness about anyone, Janet said through her tears. He was proud of his friend's success, until the very end. He kept saying, "Will's out there changing the world like we always knew he would." After the service, Will approached Janet with the letter she had sent him. His voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "I never got your messages," he said. "If I had known he was trying to reach me, I would have called immediately." Janet studied his face, and saw the genuine anguish there. "He knew that," she said gently. "He told me near the end, that you were probably just busy living the life you were meant to live." He wasn't angry, Mr. Smith. He was proud. Will attended the burial, standing at a distance as Marcus's students and colleagues said their final goodbyes. As dirt was thrown over the casket, Will made a promise that he should have made 22 years. He would never again let fame create walls between him and the people who mattered. That evening, Will drove through their old neighborhood, past the basketball court, where they had shared their dreams, past the library where they had studied together, past the streetlights, where they had made their pact of eternal brotherhood. He parked outside Marcus's childhood home and sat in his car, finally allowing himself to grieve not just for his friend's death, but for the friendship he had killed through neglect and fear. In the weeks that followed, Will established a scholarship fund in Marcus's name for aspiring teachers from underserved communities. He visited Marcus's school and spoke to his students about the man who had shaped so many of their lives. He told them about the boy who had believed in dreams, and the friend who had taught him that success without connection is just another form of poverty. But nothing could undo the years of silence, or the fact that Marcus had died thinking his childhood best friend had forgotten him. Will carried that knowledge like a stone in his chest, a constant reminder of the cost of allowing pride and fear to overcome love. Years later, when Will faced his own public struggles and personal challenges, he would think about Marcus's letter, and the unconditional loyalty it represented. He would remember the boy who had stood by him when he had nothing to offer except friendship, and who had continued to love him even when that friendship was not returned. In interviews, Will began to speak more openly about the importance of maintaining connections with the people who knew you before you became who the world expects you to be. He would talk about a friend from his childhood, who had taught him valuable lessons about loyalty and forgiveness. Though he rarely mentioned Marcus by name, the pain was still too raw, the regret too overwhelming. Marcus Williams was buried with his scrapbook, the unmailed letter, and the basketball he had carried from North Philly to West Philadelphia all those years ago. His students created a memorial garden at the school, and Will made sure it was maintained in perpetuity. But the garden, like the scholarship fund, felt inadequate compared to what Marcus had deserved. A simple phone call from the friend he had never stopped loving. The story of Will Smith and Marcus Williams is ultimately a story about the price of forgetting where you come from and the people who believed in you before the world knew your name. It's about the difference between success and fulfillment, between fame and friendship, between having everything and having what matters. Will learned too late that no amount of applause can fill the silence left by a friend's absence. No red carpet can lead you back to the relationships you walked away from, and no amount of success can compensate for the regret of realizing that the person who believed in you most died thinking you had forgotten them entirely. In quiet moments, when the cameras aren't rolling and the crowds aren't cheering, Will still thinks about Marcus Williams. He thinks about the boy who taught him that dreams are only meaningful when they're shared, and that friendship is not a stepping stone to success, but the foundation that makes success worth achieving. And sometimes, late at night, Will takes out his phone and starts to dial a number he memorized 30 years ago, forgetting for just a moment that Marcus will never answer, because some habits die hard, and some regrets never fade, and some friendships cast shadows that last a lifetime. From which city in the world are you watching this story unfold? If it reminds you to reach out to someone you've been meaning to call, let us know in the comment. And if you believe that stories about friendship and the importance of staying connected deserve to be told, please consider subscribing, because the most successful life is not measured in achievements or applause, but in the relationships we nurture and the love we give and receive. And sometimes, the most important phone call you'll ever make is the one you've been putting off the longest.